Okay, welcome everybody to our broadcast. We're right on time. So, thank you everyone for showing to our broadcast. This is Anya Lyon, and we have today a number of guests. We have Professor Lyon. He's not here yet, but he will come in any second. So we have Professor Lyon and Dr. Lala, who are our stable team, who are always here. And now we have also with us our honored guests. We have Professor Utami Widyati from the University of Malang, and we also have Dr. Ho from Vietnam. He's Associate Dean, the private university Van Lang. So we're very excited about our broadcast today. First of all, we're excited because they are continuing, which is really good. And thank you, everybody, not just the audience, but also our guests for appearing here and supporting these broadcasts. I think what's important about them, that we actually show up and that we share. It's excellent. Andrew, is this on your side? There's some noises happening here. I'll have to mute. I can't mute Andrew. Yeah, I've muted Andrew. I think, Andrew, you need to check your microphone. You were making horrible noises.
Can't help it.
What is it?
Different machines from normal.
But it's impossible. Andrew, it's impossible.
Well, then what you will have to.
Okay, so I removed this. I've muted Andrew, so we will see how we go with that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, people who are actually showing up in the comments. Nice to see you here. Today's topic is basically about not just challenges of teacher education, but how we, as teacher educators, respond to it. As I browse through the literature, American literature, Southeast Asian literature, Australian literature, I find a whole array of issues that people discuss. Some of it obviously is important, some of it less important, but each of us has our biases. And we're all nice people, but we're scholars. I'm a scholar. So when I look at some topics that people discuss in the literature, I go, why are we spending so much time on this? Right? So it's not that I am criticizing, it's just a normal human reaction because a question like this, what it does is makes me now think, is my questioning legitimate or maybe not? So these podcasts, and especially today, the podcast we have will help us broaden the perspectives in terms of which we have these doubts. Why the heck are they talking about it? Haven't we actually finished this problem? Is this relevant? I've got all the answers. I no longer need to read about it, right? So we all have that. So what I would like us to do is to ask our guests, and especially Professor Utami and Dr. Ho, Professor Ho, to talk about their own biases, their own the things that stimulate their research, the questions they feel are urgent to respond, and that's why they commit their time to those issues. So I will actually remove this PowerPoint from the screen so you actually can see our guests better. But first, let me talk. So I've introduced the discussion today. And here's our agenda for today. We will talk in general terms, what each of us thinks matters for English language teacher educator or second language teacher educator. So we're focusing on English because most of us work with a particular focus on English, but some of us actually also worked in other languages. So Professor Lyon taught French for 35 years. I taught German. I'm not sure whether our colleagues taught other languages. So whatever we're discussing is relevant to other languages, but we have a particular focus on English. So general picture, and then how we respond. Second question, how we personally respond to what matters, what we feel really matters, what are our biases, and especially why. What discourses shape our bias? What makes us believe that what we think is actually important to solve? And obviously, every question, the last question is just happens everywhere. So, where to from here? What do we believe as a result of our discussion needs following up, needs changing? We will see what our guests will say about it, and I have my own views there. So, um, Professor Utami, if I were to ask you now to start our discussion, and could you please answer the number one question? The question number one: what issue needs particular attention to enhance our English language teacher education? What issue, what issues, what do you think it's urgent to solve? Maybe you are not solving all of those, but what do you think, from your perspective, is necessary to be addressed?
Yep. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Good afternoon.
And you're not. We can't
No,
hear you.
she's not. Professor, tell me a little louder, please.
Professor Utami, we can't hear you. Andrew, Dr. Line, Professor Line, I have to mute you because you have this noise of a machine, and it will give people a headache. So either you solve it
Hear
somehow.
me now?
Okay, Professor Utami, yes, we can hear you now perfectly.
Okay, sorry. All right, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. But let me begin the discussion here by talking about the context where I'm working. Yeah, so in the Indonesian context, particularly what I've been experiencing so far, working in teacher education institutions, is that problems with the English proficiency of our teacher candidates in this case. So we realized that our students come from various parts of Indonesia, and we have quite, I don't know, perhaps I can call it as a unique way of recruiting students entering the teacher education institutions like us. So we have national examination or entrance examination, various types. Yeah, the first one is based on the students' academic record while they are in secondary education. So we can imagine how can we guarantee the reliability and the quality of academic records of so many secondary schools throughout the country. And then the second way of entering our institution is by having national examination, yeah, paper and pencil test. Yeah, the national entrance examination here is organized by the government, and uh, the items for the test here are not all of them are not related to English. So we have materials covering to Indonesian language and then physics, chemistries. So English is just a little part of the test items. Yeah, and then based on those types of selection of recruitment of the students, of course, we realize that the students coming to our institution will not have the same or similar levels of English proficiency. So to us, yeah, so far, this is a very important issue in the sense that how can we enhance their language proficiency while they're working, I mean, where they are studying with us, preparing themselves to become English teachers. So I think the biggest challenge for us is this one. And then once they graduate, very often the teacher trainings offered by the government will be things related to pedagogical aspects. Again, how to maintain, how to improve the English proficiency is something challenging. So what we do in my institution in Universitas Negeri Malang, yeah, English department, we start the study time of the students by having what we call as the intensive course, yeah, for the first semester, yeah, to make sure that students coming from different areas in the country would have a kind of similar starting point. Yeah, because of that, we also provide students with the so-called independent study center. Yeah, we call it as self-access center, so that students who feel that uh, the materials are too easy in the intensive course program, they can enrich themselves in the self-access center. So basically, the intensive English, the intensive course year has been prepared by the department to make sure that in the next semester, the students coming from different areas of the country would have a similar starting point in terms of subject matter knowledge and skills. Yeah. I think that's it.
So, Professor Utami, if I can just ask you, so basically, every country at different times as well has a different structure for training teachers.
Yep.
So, what I saw, say, in Cambodia, I had a project there. So what I noticed, what they have a bit more conventional or older, more traditional structure, and I don't have a problem with it, except for some things. They prepare teachers in after. So basically, students study English in English departments, and then, or they call them whatever, it keeps changing, but maybe institutes of foreign languages or whatever they call it today. And then they move to the National Institute of Education, something like this, and that's where they study to become teachers, and they do a course for 1 year. I'm sure they may have some other structures, parallel structures to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I'm not always sure. So can you explain to
Yeah.
us, to be clear,
In
are they in the, so are your teachers of English or pre-service teachers, are they studying in the in the Department of Education? I mean, in
no.
the College of Education, the School of Education?
No, we have a different structure in this case because, um, yeah, all teacher candidates will go to their subject matter study programs. Yeah, so it's not like other countries whereby if you want to become teachers, then you need to go to Faculty of Education, and then you will have subjects like mathematics, science, or English, or whatever. Yeah, but in my context, in this case, if you want to become English teachers, then you go to English Department of English. In my case, this is under the Faculty of Letters, yeah, Fakultas Sastra. So that's why the way we develop the curriculum for our department in this case is that to make sure that aspects related to teacher preparation should be there. So we have components related to subject matter knowledge and skills, and then components or courses related to pedagogical knowledge and skills, and also courses related to uh, research and
We've lost your voice, Professor Rotami. You may have to be, I don't know why. Oh, you muted yourself. Okay, so thank you so much. So proficiency, proficiency, proficiency. You want your students from year one as they enter your college. You want them to learn English. So I can't speak for the whole country of Cambodia, but what I saw is that the students were studying English prior to entering the program of becoming teachers at the National Institute of Education. And I felt that at this very moment, once they enter the National Institute of Education, they actually don't have classes to help them study English, right? So basically, they may be actually studying pedagogy or other subjects in English, or definitely they would have textbooks in English, but they don't have anything specifically devoted to English. I am sure they want to change it. I don't know how long it will take them. I'm not sure whether it's relevant. How long is your program, Professor
4 years,
Utami?
4 years, 4 years.
Right. So
Yeah.
the whole 4 years they study
For,
English as a language as well for proficiency.
for the proficiency, because the 4 year study time here, we have to devote anything to all the competencies and skills and anything related to teacher preparation. Of course, we cannot devote all the 4 year study time here to developing English proficiency. So very limited amount of time is actually devoted to English proficiency, because within 4 year study time, the students have to take around 146 credits, yeah, and then the skills maybe around 36 or 40, yeah, so perhaps 20 25% of the total subjects within the curriculum. And because of that, the way we enhance their English proficiency is to make sure that all courses are taught in English. Yeah, so we have skill courses related to English, and then after that we have the content courses related to pedagogy. Then when we talk about pedagogy, we'll equip our students with curriculum, syllabus, material development, assessment, yeah,
So they learn
research.
the language of the profession.
uh, the language of, yeah, I think this is one of the well, challenges that we have to deal with, in the sense that how can we, because we don't have national standards about English proficiency to recruit teachers. This is our big problems in Indonesia. Yeah, perhaps Pak Lala would be able to add some information concerning this. So anything, when we talk about national standards of teachers, for example, the national standards of teachers, which cover four groups of competencies, yeah, will refer to competencies in general, not necessarily referring to English teachers. And this is our challenge, actually, the challenge to TEFLIN. Yeah. Now, currently, I'm the president of TEFLIN, and TEFLIN is the Association for the Teaching of English as a Foreign Language in Indonesia. So basically, we need to sit and work together with all the members of the association in this case, to perhaps set up some kinds of standards referring to English teachers in particular. Yeah, because the national standards that we have still refer to teachers in general, not necessarily referring to English teachers.
Right. Thank you so much for so proficiency basis. So what you mentioned under question one, what you said, proficiency is the urgent issue,
Yeah, yeah,
and also now some way or some standardization of of the qualifications, right, in terms of language
language
proficiency.
proficiency. Yes, yeah, because if our teachers, for example, I mean teacher candidates, if graduates of teacher education institutions are not proficient in using English when teaching, they will be tempted to use Bahasa Indonesia. They will be tempted to use the local language, the national language instead of. So that's why we also did some research previously, kind of developing standardized tests to measure the English proficiency of teachers to be. Yeah? If this if this can be endorsed by the government, of course, we expect to have better situation, yeah, better ways of recruiting teachers. Yeah. So if they have the threshold level of English proficiency, we expect that they will be able to deliver the courses in English, or at least they can use classroom English, yeah, and not using Bahasa Indonesia most of the time. This is our concern actually.
Okay, so that was very interesting. Before we move to Vietnam, Dr. Lala, would you like to comment also on what you heard from Professor Utami? Would you like to add something
Yes, Anya.
on the
Could you?
question of issues?
Yeah. Okay. Could you please my first slide? Uh,
Okay, no problem.
well, I think proficiency is a big issue. Also in my university, Ibu. So every new students coming to our university, especially to our department, has also they have to take intensive English courses in the first and the third semester, and now even they have to learn more than 10 credits per week for the intensive English course. And since I returned from Australia, I have made some small scale research with my colleagues, uh, and I just found out that there is a declining trend in terms of English proficiency. So we had this English for CEFR test. So you have just sent me an email notifying us that maybe you could use this. So because it's for free, we try to uh, make a small data set. And I think there's a declining trend in terms of English proficiency. And then at the moment, only 50% of the 8 semester students graduated already. But then we are concerned with the level of proficiency. So some of them are still in, I think, B2 level, and there are a small number of students who can actually go to C1 or C2 level, and it takes time to for them to actually jump from one point to another point. I think that's a little concern at the moment that we are still working on, but actually. Traditionally speaking, the curriculum of ELT department in my university follow actually probably the same pattern. Like, we are offering less than 150 credits to be completed within 4 to 4.5 years. Even some students can go up to semester 14 if they want to, but that's actually the limit. I think in the post-pandemic era, it's a bit difficult for them to complete their study online for years. And then we also have mandatory teaching practice, 2 months only. So it's a very short time. So before doing their research proposal project with me in semester 7, they have to complete this mandatory teaching practice. And I heard, Ibu, some stories from my students who have returned to the department. Many students have done the teaching practice in extreme conditions, the flood, the rain, the wet weather. So they came to schools with very bad conditions, and then they were completely without support from the school principal, from the school teachers about how to use the curriculum and blah blah blah. So they also had to teach naughty students, for instance. So after 2 months of doing the teaching practice, they came to us, they came to the department, and they told us that, oh, I don't think that teaching is my future career. Why? Or I was disappointed because I was shocked, blah, blah, blah. So I think at this very moment, there are many students who have decided not to become English teachers because they had faced extreme conditions at school. And then actually, before doing the teaching practice, they have to complete the mandatory community service in remote areas. And I think we also have the discrete language skills units, listening, speaking, reading, writing are all separated in the first 2 years of uh, learning here. And the discreteness is evident in the curriculum. Right, we only have one academic writing unit, and then academic writing is not integrated in many other subjects, and I think that's also a problem because most of the students are not confident in producing English sentences. Well, actually, I always ask my students to write in Bahasa Indonesia and in English, and to my surprise, at first, most of my students are not confident with their Bahasa Indonesia. So I think they also have to improve their Bahasa Indonesia proficiency too when they have to learn English. And then the discreteness of the curriculum is also evidenced in the research units, where we have one quantitative research method. I think that's in the first or sixth semester. And we have qualitative research and writing proposal unit in the seventh semester, and also the scripts writing. I think the discreteness here is not very helpful for my students to grasp the idea of acquiring the overall picture of English teachers' knowledge. And could you go to the next slide, Anya, please? I think I
Before
read
I
something
do,
here. Yeah.
um, I just find it interesting. Why would suddenly
Mm,
your students have lower proficiency levels? Why would suddenly after COVID, or I don't know, after what
mm,
was the watershed moment after which the proficiency levels started declining? So I find this interesting. I also, despite of what some other people might think, I think that can I'll comment it because I
mm.
just can't stop myself because we're on the topic.
Yeah, yeah.
Personally, I think that the concept of teacher as a researcher is misunderstood. I know
Mm,
that people will hate me now because people teach research methods. People want teachers to write a thesis, and so on. I think it's misunderstood. I teach research. Um, what do we call it? It's called whatever it is called. Basically, it's called research methods
yeah.
to fourth year students in Australia.
Mm,
These students can read professional literature.
mm,
So there was a person before me who was teaching that unit, and clearly by the time I got that unit, I got it from with the message, please do
mm,
something about it. Or we're teaching them rocket science. They can't even
mm,
spell the word rocket.
mm. Okay.
Right. So what what I did is obviously I teach them research thinking first, research reading, research thinking, before we get into qualitative, quantitative. And then obviously we have misunderstandings in Australia because students in year 4, when they start, when they look at this sophisticated um, content of research subjects, which is not what I actually do, but
Mm,
in the past, they wanted to submit research papers. They wanted to do
mm.
research.
Yeah.
The thing is, they can't for many reasons. One of them is they wouldn't pass the ethics. The ethics
Mm.
takes 2 months to
Right.
do,
Right.
right? So you have to do the ethics. You have to, that takes time. And you only have like 3 months in a semester.
Mm.
So it's just not doable. By the time
Right.
they do the ethics, by the time they actually write the research proposal, by the time they actually do the research, right? That takes a year.
Yep. Right.
So it's, and on top of it, they don't have basic concepts relevant to research. They can't read it. They can't discern between one perspective and another perspective. I think that what's done in education faculties, at least in Australia and maybe also in other countries, is that we take a person who barely can say, my name is Anya, and
Mm.
we push them into qualitative research that top researchers don't understand.
Yeah,
Right? It's not,
yeah. Previously, we had programs whereby students could actually choose whether they had to go to the research stream or to non-research. Yeah. However, with the current policy, it seems like this is compulsory, yeah, mandatory, so everyone has to do the research.
mm,
This is also something frustrating actually
yep,
for us. Yeah. Why?
yep.
It's
Because
misunderstood. It's
yeah.
misunderstood. And I'll tell you from the on the basis. I'll explain my point on the basis of my experience with teachers and also pre-service teachers in programs. Um, I'm very lucky. I'm in Australia, and I'm given. I don't know whether every university does it, but I've got a lot of room to move. I've got a
Mm,
topic of the theme of a subject, and I am given standards that they have to achieve. But how I do it, it's up to me. I also, of course, can talk to other people. And as I said, when I was given this unit,
mm,
not only I was given freedom, I also was given the advice that students can cope. And that's people who actually speak English.
mm,
They just can't cope with that. That's a master level.
mm,
Um, right? So it's not for fear. So I think and it's doing a lot of disadvantage to our teachers because they are thrown to this, they can't cope, and they, as you said, they construct the picture of what it means to be a teacher wrongly. So that's what I think. Then I work with early childhood teachers because I cover the whole span of
mm,
ages. And my projects with early childhood started with my master student who finished masters already. She comes to me and she said she has problems reading the literature. Her colleagues have problems
mm,
reading the literature, right? So what she said to me, can we do a project, which we have done? We still have to publish it. I just am extremely busy, but we will just, all in due course. Can we do a project whereby we are assisted in reading the literature and connecting it, and then I added it obviously, and connecting it to our practice so that we don't aim to be rocket scientists, but somehow use the university support that will help us deal with our problems so that we can solve them with the support, not on our own. Whereas when I looked at the policies in Cambodia and at the policies like you are having here presented in this table, and I've already worked with students who teach research at the fourth year. So say Hanum Pertiwu, she's done a PhD on teaching research. And there's lots of problems emerging and so on. So rather than aiming so high, I would suggest yes, teaching people abstract concepts, abstract thinking, dealing with abstract thinking. Yes, it's extremely important, and year four is a wonderful time to do it. But pushing it too far, what it does is that people have a wrong concept of research. They don't develop the understanding that concepts are complex and they need to break them down and learn to break them down. And when what happens, then they become people who think that research is simple.
mm,
You just do your survey, and I think we will talk about it later on today. You just do your survey, and now you know what's happening. Like
mm,
you have families arguing together, right? Because of the different metaphors then they use, and therefore different ways of thinking. They think they use the words the same way. They don't. So families argue, let alone us doing research. Unpacking is a skill. So maybe what I would suggest is to find a way to reduce the tension that's in this unit. Anyway, we might, if you don't mind putting this down does anyone want to comment on what I was saying?
No,
Do you want to
uh,
comment some
no,
more?
yeah, no. I think we're yeah we have the same concerns actually. Only that because we have different policies enforcing us, then yeah, sometimes we just cannot choose, yeah, with the programs enforced by the government, yeah, because we are part of the government institutions in this case.
So I might just hurry a little bit. Dr. Lala, would you like to continue a little bit, or is
Sure,
it
yeah.
time?
Yeah, I'd like to highlight some more. So I highlighted the discreteness of the curriculum as you can see in slide two. Actually, could you show us slide two? So this is just an example. Actually, what counts? Oh, this is the first slide. Second slide. What counts as English teaching knowledge has been stable for more than probably 20 years or 30 years. It looks the same. Nothing has changed much. The discreteness is still there, and we have listening, speaking, reading, writing classes in one single semester, for instance. But then there is no such an alignment between listening and speaking, reading and writing. So I think it's a big problem because um, we we cannot develop a data set on the proficiency because one lecturer is doing different thing from another one. So I think that's a problem because
So
text.
basically, your
Yep.
point is why the heck are we separating those? Is it what you're
Yep.
saying?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The
I mean, it's
separation
almost
is
like
meaningless.
yes, and I have an idea why, but it's very much 1970s, right?
Right. Right.
Whatever they
Right.
were doing 50 years ago, we're
Mm.
continuing it. Lala,
Yeah.
do you have an idea why we're separating those?
Technically speaking, we have now more lecturers than before. I think we need to accommodate more teachers to work on the slot. And another reason is because it looks simple for us to teach, but actually it is not, right? Because in listening and reading, we in listening we still access information. We need to develop our critical thinking in listening and speaking. I think it's because in general we want to have some simple idea of learning language. So I don't know, it's simple or it's something reductionistic approach to language learning. But I think, yeah.
Professor Ho, do you have an idea why in Indonesia do you do the same in Vietnam? Do you also at your university or at the other university? Because now you are at the private university, but
Mm,
before you were in the public university. So, do you also in Vietnam have a curriculum structure that says here's listening, here's your writing, here's your reading, here's your speaking? Do you separate like this? And if so, why?
Thank you, Dr. Anya and Dr. Lala, for the information. In Vietnam, we also have we separate four different skills like
mm,
reading, separate from writing and speaking and listening also. And after that, we just integrate the
mm,
new trends. So we put reading and writing together and listening and
okay.
speaking together
Yeah.
for some times. And however, we discover that listening and speaking together, we can do it. But
Mm,
reading and writing, if we use a textbook, and for any textbooks, even though for Oxford University or Cambridge University Press, the reading is okay, but the
mm,
writing for the level is not appropriate. And then
okay.
after that, we have to separate reading and writing, but listening and speaking we still do together.
Mm,
Uh,
Professor Ho, what would you say are the major issues in to be addressed in English teaching education programs?
you mean
What do you
the
think is important? Where would you like to see research going? What do you think is important?
So in case of Vietnam, especially at my university, Văn Lang University, it is a private university. But as Anya told you that I used to work at some public university, including Ho Chi Minh City Open University,
mm,
and we before we concerns a lot about face-to-face classroom teachers. However, today, after coronavirus, then we appear to focus more on e-learning.
right.
So, especially in my university, like we not just my university but the Ministry of Education today allow university to employ 30% of the training for e-learning.
Do you agree with it?
I totally agree. Yes, because for me, I think that in like we have one module or one subject to train the student, but we don't need to ask the student to totally pay 100% to be in the classroom, because some sections they can learn, they can read by themselves, they can learn by themselves like in the theories. However, we need to do integrate something like we say that flip classroom. So for those classes, we have to record our lessons, we have to design our lesson, post it in the Moodle, and then we also do some kind of video clips for training, teaching, and sometimes we also use the virtual training. But what I concern now is that, for example, if in the classroom the teachers are easy to organize the learning activities, teaching activities, but in the virtual classroom, that is big issues that not easy to do like in the classroom. So my research is about the task based in the language learning, like how we employ the task, how we organize the task, how we help the student to do the task virtually, however similarly to face. Because when I learn from the students about the disadvantages of learning in e-learning or virtual classroom, that they cannot talk to each other, they cannot see each other. So in that situation, I think about how the student engage in the task for discussion, for solving the problem. And that's my current research is focused on, yes,
So
the
we will.
task.
Thank you so much, Professor House. So we will expand on it in the second, when we talk about special biases, our special focus points. I might just move to Professor Lyons. Sorry for hurrying up a little bit, because I think point two and point three need to be covered. Professor Lyon, Andrew, what do you think are issues that need addressing in teacher education programs? What would you like teacher education programs not to miss?
First of all, can you hear me?
Yeah?
Is it clear? All right, because I've switched to my tablet instead of my computer.
Thank you.
Well, let me make a comment on something Ho said, which is that post-COVID people started working online. My biggest concern with that, and it is continuing, and it will continue, is that many, if not most universities, when COVID struck, were required to move to online teaching within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And they did so with no support. They did so, and in fact, when support was offered by various people, including me, it was refused, and they preferred to improvise rather than rely on professional advice. Now, I'm not saying everybody was like that, but a lot of people were like that and felt that it would be an intrusion if somehow external advice was sought.
That's in
Universities
Asia.
also,
That's in Asia, right?
well, it is
Because it
wherever it
wasn't the
is.
case. I think it's not the case in Australia because we have a huge infrastructure to draw on. It's not compulsory to use it, but we have support. I'm not saying it's the world's greatest support, but any support is better than no support.
Well, it also depends on what you do with the support. So what I'm saying is that you know, whether it's in Asia or whether it's somewhere else, the point is that a very large number of people decided to go it alone and to kind of do the best they could with what they had without feeling threatened by the presence of professionals in the field. Now, I'm not saying that the professionals in the field would have been particularly good, but it would have been better than nothing. And I think that's kind of something we need to consider. The other issue, and now, of course, since COVID, we've had some changes which I think are pretty much irrevocable. I think that COVID actually offered opportunities for people to realize that some forms of online education were possible, and people are continuing and will continue with them afterwards. So I think that's the other thing. But I guess my concern is the question of, or one of my concerns is the question of teachers' knowledge and understanding and ability to think, not critically, but to be reflective on their practices. And reflective practice, I think, is very important. But in order to be able to have reflective practice, I think you have to be informed of what's going on in the field. And there is a lot going on in the field, and at the same time, there is nothing going on in the field. That sounds a bit crazy. There are things that we are discovering about personalized learning, for example, which are important. Society, because of the development of technology, has become more do-it-yourself. Right? If your printer doesn't work, you go to YouTube. You don't go to the shop as your first stop. Go to YouTube to see if you can fix your printer. You do it yourself. Because of that ability to question and discover things, we are becoming more like researchers. I mean, the average person is becoming more and more like a researcher, which is kind of interesting, which means that we are becoming more self-reliant. And by the same token, we are the outcomes that we expect are more personalized. So the nature of society is driving everybody towards a more personalized form of life. I want to solve my problems. I can do it. I can do it myself on YouTube. You can help me. You're my friend. We will talk together. We'll do it together. We'll do some research on it, and we will come up with a solution which suits us. This is called just-in-time learning. In a way, it's a form of just-in-time. Now, the problem is that just-in-time learning, personalized learning, happens in society in general, but I don't see it happening in universities. In universities, we are still stuck with the 3 hours a week of stuff. We're still stuck with lesson plans. We're still stuck with what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? You are the teacher. You are in charge. And we forget about the students. Now, I'm not saying that we really forget about the students, but we cannot monitor the students' brains and the students' activities on a moment-to-moment basis as they are doing things in order to help them. What we can do is ask them general questions. What would you like to do? What do you think your needs are? What are you having problems with? And the answers that we get tend to be generalizations. And the generalizations are okay, but actually they don't solve anything, because the problems that students have in learning, apart from the issues of English, of having proficient teachers of English, which I think is a very important problem, as Professor Budami said before. Apart from those sorts of things, the problem of a kind of personalized system is that we have to have teachers who, well, can monitor, and of course they can't monitor. I mean, nobody can monitor moment-to-moment activities. So if student A is having problems with, for argument's sake, pronunciation, student B is having problems with pronouns, student C is having problems with adverbs, and student D is having problems with discourse, how can any teacher fix it?
So if I can just interrupt a little bit because because I know your work, obviously. So if I can summarize, and if you can maybe just speak to this, if that's what suits you. What you're saying is that I'm just thinking that, okay? In response to what you said, I feel what you're thinking is, and you've said it in other broadcasts, that maybe teacher education programs are filled too much with with knowledge and therefore with tricks. So long said interaction matters, therefore make people talk to each other. It's a simple translation, which is done in the literature, obviously, and I've seen it. But what you're saying is rather than start with knowledge and follow with tricks, therefore turning education or teaching into a profession of tricks, why not work on teachers' conceptual development? Conceptual development in the beginning appears to follow slowly, right? Because you make them think, you ask them questions. It drags on, and we feel we're getting nowhere. And then by year 2 and 3, our students are the best students in the nation because they've done all that analogy work, which is the connections. And when they say whatever word from could you respond to it, Andrew? Is this what you were thinking?
Well, I wasn't thinking about tricks, although
Well, lesson
tricks.
plans are nothing, not much more, really, very often as well.
Well,
If you do
lesson.
that, a hamster will happen.
Yes,
If you
yes.
put
If
this
you
and
do,
this together,
yeah,
an
if you
egg
do,
will happen.
yes. But when you analyze it in the end, you have 15. If you have a 15-week course and you have 45 lessons in the 15 weeks, that's only 45 things that you can do, none of which is guaranteed to be learned by anybody. Um, and then we test them. And so how many words are we going to test? How many structures are we going to test? It's all very vague, and I often get the feeling that the people who are going to learn English are going to learn it anyway, no matter how you teach them, and those who are not going to learn it are not going to learn it. So we are kind of fighting a losing battle, which actually is not trivial because we're spending lots of money. Vietnam spent billions of dong on the 2020 project, uh, and so on. And so it's happening. And look, if you look at the efficiency ratings of the various countries, even if you just look at the EF ratings, uh, uh, I can't remember where. I know Thailand is 100 out of 112, and we've spent billions of baht trying to make teachers better speakers and trying to get students to learn English. And by the time they get to university, some of them don't even know what the word stone means, as I discovered one day, and could not even answer a simple 4-word sentence like, "Who was here yesterday?" Uh, okay, this was, year 4, well, not year 4, English 4, which is 3, 4 semesters into the system. So it kind of worries me to think that we keep doing the same thing. It's a bit like Albert Einstein said, only a fool would expect to keep doing the same thing and get a different result. And we don't seem to be doing much better than that at the moment. Now, I'm not being overly difficult about this, but I think we need to rethink our language teaching approaches, all of them, Western, Eastern, Northern, Southern, whatever you want to call them. I think we need to rethink them. And I think we need to shift the focus away from language, which everybody, I mean, we all love language. It's true. We love English or whatever it is that we teach. But at the same time, loving language means that we focus on language and linguistics, not on learning. We have to have theories of learning that seem to work. We need to apply them. We need to establish proper or appropriate fields of learning. In other words, what's the scope of the learning for each group of people? Not haphazard and not kind of independent. You know, this week we're going to do present simple, tomorrow we'll do present continuous. And why do them in that order anyway? But that's how it works out, and hope that people will kind of remember them. Well, they won't. So we need a couple of things. We need good samples of language to give to people, and we need time. We don't have time. This is one of the real issues. We don't have time, and we don't find ways of giving people time. There's been, as you know, a push for extended reading in the region with people like Tom Rob Waring, Willy Renandia, and so on. But and this is all for the good. Why? Because it exposes people to more input, not necessarily crash and comprehensible input, but certainly more input and more ability to struggle with the complexities of language, which they don't normally have in the classroom. Classrooms are not necessarily the best places, especially when teachers talk a lot. And even when they don't talk a lot, they're still not the best places, because then you have student talk. Students talk to each other, maybe in English, maybe probably not, but maybe in English. And the English that they hear from each other is not exactly the best English that you could expect.
Can I just, yeah.
No, just a minute. So we finish up with this kind of mishmash, which is legitimized by lesson plans. So people say, did you have a lesson plan? Yes, I have 27 lesson plans for this term. Oh, okay, that's very good. Can I look at them? Yes, oh, it looks like you've done a good job. But in reality, what have we done? And yes, there is obviously, there is progress. We know that traditional teaching provides progress. We also know that non-traditional teaching, from all the research we've done in Thailand, in China, in Indonesia, that the non-traditional programs have better outcomes than the traditional approach. And when I say traditional approaches, I mean the approaches which are currently implemented in the school system.
Yeah.
Either at university or at school. I'm not really talking about primary. I guess I'm talking secondary school and university. And this has been consistent throughout the system. China, Indonesia, Vietnam, actually, as well. Sorry about Vietnam,
Cambodia.
And Cambodia. Everything that was different from the traditional did better than the traditional. How about that?
So the thing is, it's really hard to shed the old skin. I think that's the summary of this particular part. I think that at this very moment, despite of the wide spectrum of, and we're talking about discourses that shape our research, or our own engagement in the discipline and our understanding of our relevance, at this very moment, all we spoke about was a concern with proficiency, with students' proficiency, because at the end of the day, our teachers are standing in front of a classroom, and no matter what spectrum of issues other people talk about, we are assessed primarily whether our students are not just only happy, but actually see that they are progressing with the goals that they set up for themselves when they entered the classroom. So it's hard to shed the old skin off. To shed the old skin, tradition continues to rule.
And if I can interrupt, and whether they meet the requirements of the course. I mean, it's not just the goals that they set for themselves, because they may have set no goals for themselves. or they may not be keen
In
to
relation
develop.
to the subject requirements, obviously,
Right.
yes.
Right.
In relation to the subject requirements, because when we're young, we have empty heads. So, but most of us, I mean, research in Cambodia done by my PhD student Nami Lor showed that students do, when they enter, they have these dreams. Obviously, dreams require work, but from both sides. So, proficiency, tradition, rules. There is room for papers that there's room for work, whether publishing or in schools, to actually rethink what matters. At this very moment, if tradition continues, and I actually have gone on a trip of reading a lot of literature over the last 2 days, like the whole 2 days, from morning till late. I just, like I'll share some of those. Obviously, we don't have the time. It's 1970s, 1970s, 1970s all the time. And it's simple thinking, which is what Lala was saying. So that would be good to actually, there's room for improvement in that area, but that room will come with people daring to do that reconceptualization, reflection, not necessarily going from the what is it called, Paleolithic times, cave times, into rocket science, but as an evolution, move forward just a little bit. So that would summarize. Professor Utami, please tell us, what is your particular bias in this field of language teaching? What do you commit your attention to, and why?
Right. So far in the Indonesian context, what we have been observing is that students usually do not have good reading habit, yeah, and that's why.
We lost your voice.
Sorry.
It's good now. Okay.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
So
Reading
we
habits.
realized, yeah, the reading habits. Last year, I did research on teachers' reading engagement. Yeah, and I found out that teachers were not actually engaged in reading. So if this kind of things is happening in the country, we can imagine that they might be good at talking about reading skills, but they cannot become models of good readers themselves, so that they cannot invite their students to also love reading in this case. So with our department, for example, we have one course called extensive reading, but to me, this is too late to be offered to the students. Yeah, so I actually when I was the head of the department, I had a dream. I dreamed at that time of having extensive reading from the very first year of their study program, yeah, to instill their love of reading. But again, because very often our programs were confronted with the policy from the government, yeah. Currently, for example, we have programs by the Ministry of Education, Research and higher education, that we have to have the Merdeka Belajar, things like that. So we encourage students to go out of campus. And the ministry in this case had a program of at least one semester for the students to go out, not really taking things related to their study program. They can take anything, yeah, like for example, doing teaching, yeah, even when they have to teach, not to teach English, because they are, for example, placed in a school whereby English is not offered. Yeah, so yeah,
I didn't understand. I'm sorry. What's this Indonesian word standing for? What's this? What can you say something? This
Merdeka
is very
Belajar,
new.
ya Merdeka Belajar, Kampus Merdeka. So free campus and free learning. So students are encouraged to go out of campus, yeah, to do something like, for example, independent project or they can do some teaching assistant. Yeah, they can do what village. They can go to villages to have some programs with the villagers. Yeah, and this is recognized by the curriculum as the 20 credits, yeah, not necessarily related to their study program. Now, again, this is one of the biggest problems we are facing in the country, that our performance, yeah, our university performance will be measured by the ministry based on the number of students going out of campus. Yeah, and this has been happening for 2 years, yeah, Pak Lala, yeah,
Right.
around 2 years, yeah,
2
two
years.
years, and we can
Okay, so
expect that,
Professor
yeah.
Utami, are they allowed your students, instead of going out of, going to the country or something, can they actually take a course in neuroscience? Just one
Um,
semester?
the the the
Or
the
physics or biology? Can they do
yes,
something?
yes, they can actually do that one, but this kind of program will not be considered valid by the ministry. So it is a bit conflicting in our program, in the sense that we have to fulfill the performance indicators set by the ministry, yeah, in one side, and we also have to think about the competencies and skills that our students need to have. So in this case, it's a kind of sacrificing the curriculum that we have so far, to let it just go in order for us to meet the requirements set by the ministry. And we call it as Merdeka Belajar Kampus Merdeka. So students are given freedom to do anything under the projects by the government, the ministry in this case. We have eight types of programs, yeah, and they can choose anyone. And if our students do not want to join this one, of course, we will be measured, we will be evaluated as not successful in managing the university. So again, this is a fact that we cannot avoid the the policies happening in the country, as we are part of.
Professor Utami, I didn't really
Yeah,
understand your answer to me. So they have, for one semester, for the whole
yep,
semester, they are
yep,
free to do whatever.
yep.
Within this freedom, can they do, instead of going to the village, can they take courses which normally they wouldn't take within the English degree? Would that count as part of that out of campus project?
If they can take this kind of program for which is equal to 20 credits, yes, that would be considered valid. But if not, then again,
Think.
it will not affect our performance measured or evaluated by the government. So
I'm just thinking that I don't want to question you, um, too too much to
yeah,
interrupt you, but could you express to us, if you can, because sometimes, I mean, in this culture of podcasting, there is this term steel manning and straw manning a person. So we now know the negatives. Could you find some positive? Could you still man this program? Could you find some positive, some stealing it, like
yeah,
making
the positive things that we have from this kind of program is that our students will be given more time, more opportunity to experience the real life challenges, the real life problems. Yeah, this is actually one of the one of the intentions of having such a programs, and the academic considerations made by the ministry of having this kind of program is that one of the findings of the research that they did indicated or revealed that 80% of graduates do not actually work in areas related to their study program. Yeah, And because of that, the students are encouraged to have the experience of working outside their study program, outside their university, so that they will have things related to the real life challenges. This is what they intend to have. But because this is a new program, we do not know yet the impact of having this program. Perhaps what we can predict in the near future is that whether it's going to affect the student study time or not. Our curriculum has said that normally students finish their undergraduate study in 8 semester, and we don't know whether by joining this program, students will need to extend their study time. Still,
So Professor Utami, just to summarize, so
yep,
you think reading matters.
yep,
Your research area is to support students' reading skills.
yep.
How do you justify that interest?
In my beliefs, yeah, because uh, to me, if we can read a lot, we can have more access to reading, then we'll get more input. And learning a foreign language to me is just actually is actually getting the input. Yeah, the more input we have, the better. So if we focus on developing speaking, we need partners, of course, in doing that. Yeah. So if they can work on developing their reading habit, they can do the read. They can read anytime. They don't need partners. They can improve themselves. So reading is reading provides them a lot of access to the language that they are learning, and by reading we are not limited by time. We're not limited by having or not having partners. We can just do it ourselves. And if we refer back to our curriculum, secondary English curriculum, starting from 2004, the curriculum has been text-based actually. So if our teacher candidates are good at reading, they can also be expected to implement the curriculum in secondary schools, which is text-based.
Right.
So
And
that's it.
other things, yeah, and other things in terms what you were saying, but students not necessarily end up being teachers. Their reading qualities or qualifications or capabilities enable them to become editors, reviewers, to write in English, a skill needed. So they actually can then they can have more opportunities as a result. Professor Ho, what is it that tickles you? What is it that you commit your time to, and why do you think it's relevant?
Can you give me more specific question?
Yes, just 1 second. The point two I wanted to draw your attention to: what is the focus of your research, and why this specific focus?
Um, as I
Justify.
yes, as I just talked earlier that now we need to apply 30% of e-learning into our own classroom, and we need to think about how to engage the students in the 30%, because in the 30% we need to make sure that the student study the same condition, the same status, and the same quality as the traditional training. So we think about the task design and task based in the technology language learning. So my focus now is just on the very beginning, that I design the task in the technological environment. I learned from Professor Joseph Combat, editor in chief editor-in-chief of the Journal of Computer Assisted Language Learning. And then he proposed one model that the task mostly at the beginning, before we often provide to the student to do the task by the teachers. So I focus on, and now he proposed more that if the task, the student can engage themselves to design the task, so they can participate more the learning in the learning activities, and the outcome would be much better. So when I do research, I design the task for the students, and then I also ask the student to contribute their task if they like the task, or if they want to add more tasks, or if
How do
they
you
add.
how do you tell, Professor? How do you tell whether the task is well designed?
The task that the teacher designs, number one in the course book, number two that the teachers, for example, for me, when I train the student, I often design the task by myself. So that, but the task when I design, I base on the theories of language teaching and learning. For example, at the beginning, for the skimming background, to help the student to activate their background knowledge before they learn the new knowledge, for example. And when they learn the new knowledge, I also ask them to discuss or to solve the problems, give them the problem to solve, so that they can learn the content of the lessons easier or faster, for example. Or even though, like for the homework assignment, often before I give them the task, and now I also give them some tasks to do the homework for the following week. However, I also ask if they agree with the task I provide to them, or if I want to do a different task or an additional. Because when we ask when we provide the task for the student, if they like it, so they can do better. But if they don't like our task, so the outcomes of the task not very effective. That's why I give the student multiple choices to do the task, and I also ask them to add the task if they want to, in case that they don't like the task that I provided. So I ask them, so if you don't like these kind of tasks, so what would you like to do for the subsequent 1 week, for example? This is Professor Joseph called degree of freedom to negotiate in the task negotiation. So I do it, and then I also I have some data already, including convenience or challenges when the student provide a task. For example, some students, they love to do the task provided by the teachers because they hold a belief that the teacher is more professional, so they can give the task related to the content. But some other students, they said that they love to do their own task, because if they provide their own task and they like it, so they can do it best. And some students
So, Professor
agree. Yes,
Ho, do you use, pardon me, so do you use textbook tasks as the basis for further changes and negotiations with students? So did you, I'm not sure if I understood it well, but I think my memory says to me that you said that
both.
you, the textbook is your base model, and then you work from there.
Mm. So the task provided from the textbook and the task that I designed by myself, and then I also ask the student to contribute the task if they want to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
just in addition to. So Professor Joseph called that is the degree of freedom,
yeah, I
because
understand.
yes, he said that if the student have the free degree of freedom to design the task, so they can do the task better.
Yeah, so I
This is-
just wanted to know because the textbook task used as a base somehow for teachers can function like an assurance in a sense that the task has the things that matter, right? So rather than invent things on on your own and so on, you have some assurance that there are some elements in your tasks that actually are important for assessment. Do you know which assessment scales do you use? What reference frameworks you use for assessment?
Um, Assessment, for example, mostly I use like, for example, if for the academic writing, and then the rubrics for writing, I also use the rubrics that I designed since my PhD degree. For example, for argumentative essay, and then we have some rubrics for like thesis statement or topic sentence, coherent or unity or
Sure.
supporting sentences, something like that. Yes. So that
Dr. Lala, thank you. So, yeah, did you finish, Professor Ho?
yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you kindly. And Dr. Lala,
Hi again,
and
Anya.
what is shaping to be your research focus and
Now,
why?
now, I'm more focusing on developing strategies to support reading and writing engagement of my students. Actually, so in the
How about
past,
speaking? How about
uh,
speaking?
I think it's more integrated now because listening, speaking, reading, writing now more integrated in my project. And I find there's a big mystery in reading and writing, right? So in the past, I taught academic writing and phonology, but since I was a child, I was in love with the music of English. I think I was pretty much exposed to English since I was very probably less than 8 or 7 years old. And you and Andrew Lyon have expanded my love of the language of the intonation into this academic writing project. So I think the mystery now that I have is how actually the sound of the music, the intonation, the intonational pattern of the language actually guides the comprehension of the reader and the writer. I personally believe that academic writing, which is now my concern, is a personal expression. I know it's a formal expression, but then it's still a personal expression. So since I came to CDU under your supervision, I expanded my horizon on that path. How can I actually help my students to express their personal thoughts in the context of English academic writing by integrating their multisensorial capacities as human? Because I believe that meaning does not reside in text. So reading is a matter of meaning making system, and then writing is also semiosis, meaning making system that is based on the personal experience of the students. So
So
as you said,
if I can
yep,
interrupt you, Doctor. So we have a situation. I'm just trying to connect a few threads.
yep,
Um, when Professor Lyon was talking before, we talked about broadening the conceptual thinking of a teacher,
right,
the conceptual frameworks, that the thinking, daring, them learn, daring to be present inside of the profession. And I think what you're saying is you want the students to be present in
right,
the writing.
yes,
The reason why trying to connect the two is that when I was on my reading spree over the last 2 days, I didn't see the authors in those papers.
mm,
All I could see is long said interaction matters, therefore we made students talk. Uh, um, Someone said this matters, therefore we did this. I just
mm,
didn't see the bridge. I didn't
yeah,
see the
yep,
person. It's almost like our training, research training programs
mm,
remove the person,
right, right,
and then we claim we taught them critical thinking.
mm,
I have a slide for it, but I'm not
okay,
sure if I'll have a time for it. But I think that we are we are still in the culture, and it doesn't matter whether it is Indonesia, Germany
mm,
or Australia or Vietnam. We are
yeah,
still in the culture that if we do not understand something, we must be stupid.
mm,
It's our fault,
mm,
right? Because this person who wrote this paper, they clearly understand it. I don't, so I will cover up. I will remove myself from the paper and I'll cover myself with
mm,
references,
yeah,
references, references. I have to say it could be a right strategy or a wrong
mm,
strategy. I cannot say, but I can
yeah,
tell you that my own work was made from not necessarily not understanding,
mm,
but something like that. The first thing I usually do, and now I'm a little bit more an expert because I can't remember what I was doing when I was 30, right? It was a long time ago. But the first thing I do is I try to articulate my own thinking.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then I look into what other people say. And if I understand, and it's not that I want to acquire what they say, I want to bridge what they say with what I said before, like my
mm,
own thinking. It's a skill. And from these questions emerge.
yeah,
And rather than be embarrassed
mm,
about it, here I am. Basically, that's me. So, me is that bridge that I articulate between what they say and what I said. And then,
yeah,
it may take 10 years for
mm,
a new baby, a new me to emerge.
right,
But I do it. If you remember Jordan Peterson, Professor Jordan
mm,
Peterson, when he had this famous discussion with this, it went like viral. So that was like a few years ago back, like 2016 or 17, when he had this discussion with British journalist,
journalist, yeah,
right? What he said to her, "Where are you? What you're doing is spitting at me all these narratives.
yeah,
This is how it is. This is how it is. This is how it is. Rah, rah. But where are you?" And I think what I thought Andrew, well, I know what Andrew does when he teaches, and you know too,
mm,
right? And what you are saying is what you were interested in giving students tools so that they are present in the paper, in the whether academic or otherwise,
yeah,
argumentative writing. You want them to be present.
yeah, yeah,
And it's interesting concept. I mean, obviously, you know me, so I teach this way, and
yeah,
Andrew does, and so on. But it's interesting concept when it comes to you teaching academic writing. And I think that Professor Utami, you may relate it too. When students
mm,
do the reading, right, it's to develop themselves. I
yeah,
mean, we read to engage in a conversation.
Yeah.
So
Would
it's
like
also
to listen, would like to hear their voice. Yeah.
right. So it's about broadening their own presence in life as
yeah,
a result, and it's about them, not necessarily about quoting I read this person or I read this person. It's about the impact. I think it's interesting. Sorry for interruption. Would you like to add something, Lala, to justifying your focus on
yes,
developing students' presence in
right.
the papers and
So
as a
at the moment, I'm teaching academic writing in semester three, and I feel that it takes long time for my students to become an avid reader first, because we have to make sure that my students can read like half an hour a day, and they can write, let's say, 15 minutes a day. And I want to see that kind of small engagement. So I want them to win over small things on their daily basis before they can actually express the true voice in their academic writing. I know it's going to take longer for them to have that confidence in writing, because I'm still working on my quality of writing too. But I think I enjoy every process of it. I mean, yes, we do lots of stuff. We read lots of things together, and then we explore a lot of concept from you, from Andrew, and from many other scholars that we have collected in my life in Darwin. And I think it's very inspiring. When my students came back to me in one single session that they have developed this new concept about teacher education, about assessment, about curriculum, about pedagogy. So I think it's a very nice experience when it comes to teaching writing on it.
Maybe we should move to Professor Andrew Lyon if he's there. Andrew, are you there? What is your pony, your focus of your work, and
Well,
how would you frame it without making it? Yeah, how would you frame it, and what discourses shape it? Why this focus?
I'd rather make some general comments and then maybe we can talk about me.
Okay.
But the general comments are, there's a lot of research being done. A lot of research is low level. A lot of research is written in order to fulfill requirements by government and so on, to write things quickly and copiously, and to be published in appropriate journals, which usually are identified as Scopus Q1 to Q4. Oh my goodness, you are down the drain already, even if you are in Scopus. No, I'm joking, of course. But still, there is this pressure to publish stuff. So a lot of stuff is published that actually is not very interesting or not very worthwhile. But it's technically correct, and it's valuable in the sense that it adds a little bit of information. And it tends to be independent from any learning theory. It kind of tends to be something that, oh yeah, it can be applied here, it can be applied there, it can be applied there. I think what we are
Andrew,
lacking.
I need to interrupt you. I think that because I know your work, I wouldn't mind you to be a little bit more precise, because I can hear the audience already thinking, well, what are you saying? Everybody says, I'm writing, my learning theory is Krashen, or my learning theory is Vygotsky, or constructivism. Why would you say that? I'm pretty sure that
Because
almost
most,
every paper refers to some sort of concept like that.
well, every paper does that because that's popular. That's the popular approach to things. Everybody talks about scaffolding, for example. Scaffolding is about leading people towards a goal that is predetermined by teachers, generally. This predetermination cuts the student out of the equation. It reduces the student's influence, and it's very difficult to say what it, it's a kind of apprenticeship model. For example, and if you say, well, Krashen, okay, good. Well, what's Krashen? Krashen says, let's, I mean, the vulgarization of Krashen is something like, okay, well, let's have as much input as possible. Well, what's that input? How is that input going to be determined? Oh, well, we'll give them a reading test first, and we will also we'll also do a reading text analysis of the stuff that they should be reading, and that way they will be able to get texts which are at approximately their level of performance. Well, that may or may not be. I'm not saying that's not valuable. I think it is valuable, but the question is, so what? In the most silly sense, Krashen is a form of constructivism, which is you build on your past. Sure. Well, most forms of constructivism, even my own work, which is kind of constructivist in spirit, will deal with that. So we're kind of beyond that, I think, and we need to start moving toward systems which are more realistic in terms of the 21st century, and which are more realistic in terms of getting results from a mass population. Uh, countries want to become, well, one gets the impression that governments want countries to become multilingual, or at least bilingual, or at least bilingual sufficiently to enable trade and tourism and medical tourism and dental tourism, all of those things that will bring income and prosperity to the country through the use of language. Now, is this happening? Well, regrettably, no. It's not happening. And sorry, Ho, I'm going to give an example from Vietnam, but anyway, I was in Saigon. I wanted to go to the Notre Dame Cathedral in Saigon, which is one of the landmarks of Saigon. And I went into the taxi and I said something like Notre Dame or Notre Dame Cathedral. I would have expected the taxi driver to understand at least Notre Dame and maybe Cathedral and take me there. But no, that didn't work. I had to rush back in, get the hotel owner to write out in Vietnamese what the name of the cathedral was, and then I was able to be taken there. Now, that's not, I mean, at the most superficial level, you'd expect something like that to be already under control by someone who is in daily and permanent contact with tourists. And it's not happening. So we're not doing it right. And I don't think it's because we're worrying about scaffolding or whether we're worrying about necessarily extensive reading, which will not happen, Dr. Utami, because it will not happen because the system doesn't let it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the
right.
problem. You remember I spoke about samples? Let's call it the books, and time. We need both, and we just don't have those. So we need to do something to improve the connection between students and the learning and the samples and the time. Those three things together. And it seems to me that what we are not doing is addressing large frameworks. And the large framework is not Vygotsky. The large framework is not Krashen. The large framework is how do we enable students to learn more effectively, given the individual differences of people and given the conflicting or sometimes conflicting objectives of governments, students, and teachers. And we haven't solved that, but what we have done very effectively is continued to put people in classes according to their age. Sometimes we discriminate between them and we put the good ones together in group 1 and put the bad ones together in group 100. And so you wonder what happens to the students in group 100. The students in group 1 will be, yeah, they'll be very good, but the students in group 100 are not going to make it. Or maybe they will because there's a lot of pressure on us to pass them. I mean, people want us to pass students. They don't want us to fail 80% of students. So there's, and you, Dr. Utami, as dean, would be very aware of the kinds of connections between the faculties which operate and the pressures that one faculty places on the other and so on. So it's very difficult to continue along the path that we are without trying to develop some high-level abstract frameworks for our teaching and learning systems, which may lead to significant reforms in the educational system, not only in the languages area, but elsewhere as well. And that's not something which is easy to have happen because governments like harmony, their harmony, not our harmony, not the students' harmony, and tend to see everything else as chaotic. So yes, we are chaotic and we have to accept it, we have to admit it, we have to look at what seems chaotic in students, but which from the student's perspective actually is a form of order and harmony. And then work on that, build on that, and respond to their individual needs. And we're not doing that very well. We do this through things like needs analyses, which don't do anything in the end. They just talk in kind of general terms. And so we need to go towards such systems as what I've called precision language education. And precision language education is a system whereby you give precise diagnoses of people's problems as they arise, when they arise, and people come to you for help. This is a new concept. We haven't dealt with it very much. We need to look at areas like neuroscience. We've been doing some work in China. Professor Ho is aware of one of these projects as he was chairman of the PhD committee that awarded a PhD recently on this issue, where we worked with ways of lightening the load on the brain in order to enable through dichotic, what's called dichotic listening, which is you hear two different signals through the ears. And we finished up with some improvements in language, but also we finished up in a reduction of the load on the student's brain. Well, if it reduces the load on the student's brain, it releases resources for processing language better. So we're into those sorts of things which typically are not, I can't hear you, which typically are not dealt with by traditional TESOL style programs.
Okay,
but
the difference between what you're saying and say Michael Long is such as follows. You and Michael Long talk about load reduction. Michael Long says interaction because I can't remember his justification of interaction, but obviously we learn through interaction, so therefore interaction. And then he looks for.
Michael
But
Long
just
would
wait.
have said, sorry, let me finish that one. Michael Long would have said, I will help you and guide you towards
Yes.
what I believe,
Well, what
I
he
think
looks
you want
for
to say. Yeah, what he's looking for.
on the basis of random guesses. Help. Yeah. So, and that's different than what you're doing. What you're doing is you're looking for the building blocks of processing. So what you're looking at, well, you're looking for evidence
Yes.
in terms of which science identifies the building blocks of information processing,
yeah.
and then you interpret them in strategies that you then test. Well, that's different because you've got a layered argumentation for your strategies, as opposed to, well, we're learning because we talk, so therefore I'll randomly pick some hints that maybe help, maybe not.
Well, the basis of that, there are two things I want to say, and it's impossible to deal with that very quickly or very well in the time that's here. But we need to remember that we are essentially biological. Our body stands between our minds and the rest of the world, and our body processes information as it comes in and out, together with the mind. So the mind and body work together in a processing sense. And so one of the questions I have is, how do we use the resources of the body in conjunction with the resources of the mind to bring about improved conditions for learning? And we've done some work on that, and it seems to be but at the same time, we need to integrate that. That's a big theory of perception, and this big theory of perception involves actually what we might call a theory of meaning making. So meaning, we in the end we are meaning making machines, and so we are constantly caught up in how do we make sense of the signals? How do we make sense of the signals? And the students, when they are learning a language, are in that process too. How do we make sense of the signal? How do we make sense of the signal? When they are listening to things, they don't understand, not because they don't know the words, but because they don't understand how the word is said by the speaker. So they don't have a range of understandings, of realizations of the words that they already have in their heads. And that's part of the extensive reading, extensive listening experience. But how do we facilitate that is the question. Can we do it better? But that has to be put in the context, not just of one little reading experiment or one reading experience, but in the context of an entire system for enabling the learning to happen. And we're moving now into a mass market. We're moving away from schools to some extent. We're moving to migration and mobility across the ASEAN context and across the world anyway. And we need to come up with a solution so that we are not number 100 or number 66. I think Indonesia is, I'm not quite sure. Vietnam is around 60 something also. But despite all of our efforts, we work very hard to teach English, but it's not working. And that's the problem. And it's not because we're stupid. It's not because we haven't read stuff. It's not because we haven't imported experts and teachers and so on from all over the world to come. I mean, I was at TEFLIN a few years ago as one of the keynotes, and it's not because of all of that. It's because nothing happens once the experts have gone away. And even so, what is it that the experts are bringing? I'm sorry, I know that sounds very critical, but it kind of is true. People feel good. Oh yeah, this is what I do in my classroom. Okay, well then I don't have to change. But wait a minute, the EF results put you at 100 out of 112. Oh, that's true, but wait a minute, can't be my fault. Well, it isn't just teachers' faults. I'm not saying it's a teacher's fault. I'm saying it's the whole system that needs to be looked at. And people will say, oh, you're crazy. You're never going to change the system. Well, maybe that's true. But there are some things that can be done within the system that enable some of these changes to happen. So you can give students freedom within individual courses. You can enable them. Freedom, by the way, always wins over coercion. And that's one of the things that our research in Asia has shown over the last 10 years or so.
I think I remember you had a student that after she's done the research, and that point was proven that freedom won over coercion, she cried.
Yes, she did.
She believed so much in control.
Yes,
and I think we still find it very hard to drop that concept that students are just a tape recorder. We're just putting information onto their heads. And if it sticks, that's great. And I think it's that sticking of our.
Let me tell you the story briefly, because she had two groups of students, both working with social platforms, platforms. One group had the ability they were doing writing skills. The students were writing, and the second group of students were doing the same tasks, except that the second group of students had this teacher as a guide. So they could go to the teacher and ask for help. Well, it so happens that the students remembers this, I think. It so happens that the students who had no guidance actually outperformed the students who had a guide. And that's when she started crying, because she wanted to show that she, as a teacher, was helping people to perform better.
And initially they were scored as lower proficiency, right? So after the course they exceeded.
Correct. And initially, for some reason that was not very clear, the experimental group was actually scored as being below the level of the other group, and then they outperformed with freedom and in half the time, which was kind of surprising. So I just throw that in because people think, oh, but the teacher is the guide, the teacher will do this, the teacher will that. No, it turns out that no teacher, and we've done this in other contexts. We've done this in the context of tourism English. Students were given freedom to organize their own teaching, their own lives, and interact with native speakers, as opposed to the standard classroom. The students with no teachers actually did better than the students. How about that? And it's crazy. It doesn't make sense, but that's how.
So, in a nutshell, what you were saying, and you weren't just focusing on one aspect of your research, but basically on the framework of your research, which is to learn about the process of learning and also understand what the concept of education actually involves, and connect the two in an environment where students can develop their critical capacities as citizens, and at the same time be supported with tools developed from your understandings of how we as biological creatures process information. Is this what you were saying?
Amongst other things, yes.
Among other things.
Yes.
Well,
Well, when I say amongst other things, I mean it's not just the biological, but it's also intellectual things, and also about getting a sense of self and self-awareness, and the ability to self-correct, the ability to make good decisions. Because people say, oh, students will never make good decisions. They don't know what they do. But they are, in reality, able to make good decisions and come up with objectives and meet the objectives in a better way than when they are being told, oh, you must do this, oh, you must do that.
So what happens to the culture that we develop inside of students' brains when we treat them as tape recorders and when we believe that they can't make decisions? When we do that, when we give up on the student, when we give up on our children, right? When we give up on our students, what culture is it generating? And I just want to go now quickly to point 3 of our discussion, because Professor Utami asked me to finish straight after 2 hours. We just don't have much time. I would like you to I would like to engage your random comments on some things I found in the literature. I will not show all of them, just a few. So this was, I was looking at category 1 journals. So language learning, innovation in language learning and teaching here. And so I looked at the abstract. Obviously, Lala knows that I develop my own systems in terms of discourse analysis and so on. There are many systems. I have my own because it works for me, and it works pedagogically. It seems to be actually efficient so far. So if we look at the last paragraph, so what these people were interested in was to teach teachers about genre-based pedagogy, and then see how that teaching impacted on their practice in schools. So by cognition is never defined. Although this paper is about teacher cognition, it is never defined in the paper, which is what I typically find in journals. What if we're interested in reading, what is reading? If we're interested in task, what is task in relation to what dimension of curriculum policies or the way people function in society? How do we define these things? Here, the example was teacher cognition. Now, obviously, once you read the paper, you get an idea. Teacher cognition means what they understand. That had to be implied. It's implied, but not defined. When you don't define, you you cannot be criticized because and you cannot even assess your own shortcomings because there was no independent framework against which you worked. You created your own illusionary framework and you said, well, that's teacher cognition is what they understood. Oh, look, what they understood was that. So anyway, so definitions help us to have some independent frameworks against which we can create our models and assess our impacts. That's useful to have if you're, would someone say, if you want to learn from your own work. Anyway, so what they did, they tested teachers' knowledge about genre pedagogy prior to professional development. Then they gave them professional development. They may have tested them also what they understood from that. I can't remember anymore. And then they tested them again, not tested, but they did an interview trying to find out their understandings of possible challenges they may face in teaching argumentative. Anyway, they tested them, they surveyed them about how they worked with the model in classroom. So what the study said, the second paragraph, the teachers developed 2 kinds of propositional and what we may call conceptual emergent knowledge of argumentative writing. in the course of exposure to this genre-based instruction. They acquired concepts, and they proved to be able to actually, after they tested them, they proved to be able to apply some of the they were able to work with those concepts in classroom. I wasn't sure why the writers of this paper felt it was a success. I must say that when you undergo some form of transformation in your professional career, maybe personal as well, you really learn what transformation involves. Just because you call it a success, it doesn't necessarily mean it is a success. So I would like you to think about it here. That was done, I think, in that study was done in Iran or Iraq, in Iran, I think. So you probably can recognize the names better than me. So I wanted to know about, what I will propose to you is as follows. This was professional development. They trained people to some method of work, and then they wanted to find out whether students, or the teachers, the in-service teachers could work with those concepts in classroom, and they called it a success. My question is, I wanted to know what the teachers actually learn, and I wanted to know what the authors of this paper learned. And here's my point. I think Andrew was talking about personalization. I was talking about the bridge between the theory and then who I am, right? What the theory says and who I am, you need to develop a bridge so that you develop your own not personal voice, but your learned voice, not the repetition voice, but the learned voice. And I feel that the objective here I feel it was clear in the paper that the objective was for teachers to learn what the professional development valued to be the right tools. But what the teachers did not learn is to dare to point to the problems with those tools, so that they could then create, on an informed basis, new tools, or to signal that maybe there is something not quite working, right? The teachers did not have the right to question those concepts. Their job was to learn them and apply. Now, what the professional development people did here, they didn't give themselves a chance to learn from the participants. All they wanted to see is whether the participants did as told. That's a waste of money, because that project would have cost money, right? I learned the trick of bringing things down to money because Andrew was a chair, not just a professor, but also chair of many departments. And, he sometimes said, well, that costs money. How are we spending it? Because sometimes you really have to bring it down to that. And here, that project cost money. I want to know, how much did we get out of that project? They basically taught that model as a religion, as a dogma. What I always say with my students, whether you're Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, have your religion, but let everything else out of religion. What's religion? It's religion. What's not religion? It's not religion. Here we are in the job of learning, right? So whether it's genre-based model developed by people whenever or anything else, it's not a dogma. It's something for us. It's a tool for us to make better. If we treat that tool as a dogma, we will stay for 2 million years with it. We had tools like stones made the same way for 2 million years, right? Before technology improved later on. So that's a waste. That's a waste. Professor Utami, because I have very little time left, can you tell us some more about your experiences? Do you use your research to learn about your own models, to reshape them, remodel, or can you tell us some experiences that might relate to my critique of this paper, which I think is relevant to our discussion today?
Yeah. But again, yeah, very often we are confronted with policies whereby we cannot avoid. Yeah, so like a gender-based instruction in the Indonesian context, we have introduced this since 2004. Yeah, uh, but but uh, with the gender-based instruction here, the challenges teachers and also teacher educators are facing is actually uh, we have two problems. The first one is related to the language itself, and the other one is related to developing critical thinking, in the sense that when we don't have this kind of concepts in the teaching of the first language in Bahasa Indonesia, then it's going to be harder for us to transfer it to foreign language teaching like English in this case. So I was thinking about sustainability with research like this. Yeah, so it was considered as a success by the researchers, but I was thinking about how sustainable the project was in terms of teachers implementing the understanding, the cognition of the genre-based instruction in their day-to-day teaching activities. And I think Pak Lala is also aware of what is happening in this country. We might be considered as wasting money as well for some projects, yeah, because they are targeting the number of participants joining the project instead of making them really understand. So for the ministerial point of view, having statistics in terms of number of participants will be more important than uh,
Real
deeper,
effects.
yep, deeper understandings of concepts or innovations or whatever.
Or moving forward, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the student or it's the teacher that has to make an inner understanding of it, rather than using the model of genre or whatever model like a hammer.
Yeah.
Everything is a nail and
You,
you
you, you,
continue
you
the
you know
hammer.
that yeah, you know that when we are teaching curriculum, for example, in teacher education study program like us, yeah, what we teach our students, of course, the curriculum that has existed, that has been implemented, yeah, and we never know what's going to happen in the future. For example, once our students graduate, they're going to face a new curriculum, and then they will find problems again understanding the new concepts introduced by the government. So this is also something that we have to think about from time to time, preparing our students in one time, and once they graduate, they will face something different from the previous one because of different policies happening in the country. So to me, what needs to be equipped to our students, uh, teacher candidates, yeah, student teachers in this case, will be the basic concepts, yeah, anything related to theoretical understandings of English language teaching, and we have to encourage them of not getting panic soon whenever they are facing something new. So you have to think carefully and then try to understand the concepts. And very often, there is nothing new under the sun, just because we have different names and then we get panic. Yeah, that's it.
Right. So right. So yet we have to get better as humanity right? We can't just wait until someone from America comes up with an idea, and then we will be just basically peasants following the thing and then ending up doing the same as we've done for 50 years. Okay, Professor Utami, if you need to, you can leave. I will just leave a discussion now for everyone else who wants to make comments regarding future. Lala, Andrew, Professor Ho. Professor Ho, maybe we might start with Professor Ho now. But Professor Utami, thank you so much. And if you want to, if you can stay, please. If you have to go, by all means, please. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
past 2 hours. We're past 2 hours, but I don't want to
yep,
cut it short because some
right,
people might still be
yep,
interested. So,
okay, yeah,
Professor Ho, Dr.
yeah,
Lala, Andrew, what's your comments about the future? Thank you.
right.
Thank you so
So,
much.
Thank you
space,
very
space,
much.
yes, yes, yes,
Thank you, Ibu. See you.
see.
So Professor Ho has gone too. Oh, okay. Lala, where to from here?
Microphone.
Microphone.
Lala.
Microphone. Lala, microphone.
Oh, sorry. So I think I'm going to follow the path that you have opened up for me in my PhD. So I think I'm getting more and more interested in developing a new scholarship at the ELT department. Um, um, I'm trying to convince myself that I can do much even better than the past. I mean, I need to expand my horizons on the new things, on the new trajectories, on the new territories of learning, and it's getting more and more insightful. And the scholarship that I'm currently interested in building right now is the scholarship of innovation. I think that concludes our talk
Yeah,
today, or at
innovation.
least, yeah.
Innovation I'm not sure if you agree, but basically, not just because we don't understand, it doesn't mean we're wrong. It could be that they're
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
Or it could be that more questions need to be asked, right? It's not
right.
necessary. We're not always the one that are stupid. It's just this sticks with me because from Wahid Nasruddin's PhD, it really struck me that finding that people think that their questions will be stupid, they don't dare to ask questions, and they think
Mhm.
that they don't have the right to ask questions. Maybe they don't have 50 years experience, but the people who have 50 years experience, they started also like us.
Mm.
um yeah, Andrew, where to from here?
Hmm.
We're past 2 hours, Andrew.
Well, where to from here is very interesting. I think that we need to stop focusing so much on little research or low-level research and start
Mm.
looking at high-level frameworks. I suggest, something like rhizomatic systems, or something like that, which goes beyond the everyday or the little research. Okay, so even the research that I have been doing on the brain and is actually universal. I mean, it doesn't matter because it's biological. It doesn't matter. It will always apply. But we need a framework in which to house this stuff, and we need a framework to try and ensure that our hit rate, the success rate that we have at the moment, will be
With
improved
our students.
with our students. We are not, as I said, we're not particularly successful. And why
I
is
mean, not
that?
you and me.
And
It's just like the
not
field.
not you and me. I mean, the profession is not particularly successful, and not just in Asia, but all over the place.
What I suggest maybe
In
that
foreign language departments in the USA, for example, and so on, we are we are not particularly successful as a whole. So how do we go from being a, a profession which produces, I don't know, 10% of really proficient speakers to something different? And this is not through want of trying. We've got more experts than we can imagine.
Yeah.
And since COVID, we've had even more experts than we could possibly imagine. People who both promote themselves very avidly on webcasts, on webinars, and people
Yeah.
who appear out of nowhere as famous experts because somebody put them on a webinar.
Mm.
So I think that I think we've done a lot of overviewing for the last 5 podcasts, and I think that what we might do as from now on is to focus on specific research. Research, but you conducted our guests, the literature, and we will be now. We now have a little bit of a framework that we've done over the last 5 broadcasts. So I think that now we can refer to the things that we have learned and now use those to use them
Yeah.
as a lens to look at research that we've done ourselves and our guests, and now go into more practical examples over and over and over again, and I think that we're ready for it now. We might have a conversation on that, but I think we're ready. So I might close the broadcast for today if you're happy with that.
Yeah,
And
I'm
to
happy.
not take too much time, we still have another one in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
delightful. Thank you so much. Thank
Okay,
you
bye-bye.
to our
Bye bye.
audience.